Hello and welcome to Brian Moore's Full Contact with the Telegraph. Well, we're now just less than a week away from the first test between the British and Irish Lions and the Springboks. Warren Gatland's side were given their first real test on tour last week when they lost to South Africa A, but they refused a rematch a few days later in favour of a much more routine fixture, which they then won comfortably against the Stormers. The defence coach Steve Tandy has revealed that the majority of the test side has already been chosen. However, he also revealed that the selection process was one of the most difficult things that he's been involved with during his time in the game. We'll be looking ahead to the first test in detail with a man, well, he knows, let's face it, he knows a little bit about preparing Lions test squads. It's the great Sir Ian McGeechan. He'll be with us shortly. We'll be looking at who should be in Saturday's lineup and what it's like from a coach's perspective in the week leading up to a test series. As for the Springboks, they followed their win over the Lions last week by suffering a shock defeat to the Bulls on Saturday. They lined up as a South Africa A team featuring 9 Springbok World Cup winners, beaten by a club side just a week before test series. What does that say? Well, we'll have reaction to the defeat and a look at the state of South Africa's COVID-ridden squad and indeed the state of South Africa in general at the moment. As ever, we'll be having the latest on the rest of the Lions tour, including the return of Alan Wynne-Jones, who resumed the captaincy, took it back off Conor Murray, and the impact of Marcus Smith on his Lions debut. Well, I'm delighted to say alongside me, for the next few weeks, we're going to have a balanced perspective. The former South African captain is here, Bob Skinstad. Hello, Bob.
How are you going, Brian? Great to be here.
Yeah, look, let's start off. It's been a difficult week in South Africa off the field. Civil unrest, there's been some rioting, looting. It's reported that maybe a couple of hundred deaths. Is it just COVID or are there wider things?
Political unrest at the moment.
Oh, okay.
I mean, recently, I think about 10 days ago, there was the conviction of the former corrupt ex-president Jacob Zuma and jailing of him. So it's a sort of a support faction of his that is
from the ANC.
Well, he was the leader of the ANC. They are the biggest party, and the incumbent president was the next leader of the ANC. But Zuma has been fighting a trial for many, many years,
right? And
he actually has only been jailed for contempt of court.
Oh, I see.
But the unrest has been led by a lot of his supporters within the community.
So it's a deliberate attempt at destabilising, is it?
Very much so.
Okay. Well, I've spoken to a number of former Springboks in the past few weeks. Yourself, John Schmidt, Robbie Kempson. And they've told me there's a huge appetite for the Lions tour. Will these events have any impact on the general sporting fraternity?
Look, South Africans are never proud when something like this is happening, but it is one of the most unequal countries in the world. There is a history of civil unrest and unrest in general. I think the tour is going to go ahead. I think a lot of people are affected by this, and there's some calls for saying stop the tour because you need to focus on these events, but
they're not really government.
They're not really
things,
linked, and they're not really justified to. So I don't think so. I don't think it's going to affect the tour. However, I do feel very strongly that it's something that the world needs to see, and the tour can't sort of take away from that, if you know what I mean. So hopefully they can be resolved, and then the tour can also go ahead.
Let's have a discussion about the biggest test the Lions have faced, the one they didn't get over, the South Africa A side. What do you make of that side, the South African style? Will that be replicated in the tests? And how will Gatland have been weighing up, the relative strengths of players who didn't play in that game, but have seen to do well in weaker games? Mm-hmm. How will this all be playing out?
Well, I think, the last time we spoke about Georgia being, a big physical side. Was that enough for South Africa? Was it not? I think this is the first time we saw very close to a Springbok starting lineup, minus probably 4 or 5 players, and named in the South Africa A side, probably for that reason, because there was no second follow-up test for Georgia and there was no other games for them to play. And then, they were physical. They were good. Set piece was very organised. Defence was on a very, very high standard, starting and finishing. And I think once they created or prized open an opportunity, they scored a try, and that only happened 3 times. One was tackled out, the other 2 were scored. So South Africa will be pleased. The Lions will, I think, go away from that saying, well, we know what we thought we knew. Yeah. They haven't seen. There's no big new thing from South Africa that suddenly appeared, but I think Gatland knows, he's got a mountain, whether it's a hill or a mountain, he's got something in front of him, he's got to climb it, and it's not going to go away. So he'll be pleased that he's at least seen a bit of it.
There's no reason for South Africa to move away from the sort of game they played, not least because of lack of preparation time, and because they're very good at it, and because against nearly every other side, they're good enough to win. And if the Lions get off slowly, as they have been doing, and South Africa get a lead, they're a very good side, at keeping the game on their terms, and keeping leads like that. So I don't think there's anything new going to come. For me, the essential thing is for the Lions to find a way around the defensive wall that South Africa bring. The organised second and third, defensive ploys with Faf de Klerk sweeping round the back. And to me, they've got to be a lot cuter in where they take the ball into contact.
Yep.
Not just head on. Men inside, outside, the ball across, the deep ball, so that South Africa can't cover everything in defence. So you've got to guess, and they'll get it right most times. But if they don't pose those questions and they keep running straight, they won't get much joy.
Well, it's a good big un versus a good big un.
Yeah.
You're gonna. It's just going to be a clash that'll end in tears for some players, and they won't make test 2 and 3 because that's all it'll be. But Brian, I think you're right. If they can be. And, I'm not sort of saying that you've got to change everything to rugby league style, but just a little bit covert about, the ball behind the back. And that's why I've included in my teams that I think could unlock South Africa, Owen Farrell, because he's got a sort of almost a league-esque ability to pass behind the back or in front of the player next to him and create a bit of outside space. They need that. Otherwise, because I promise you, they're not going to bash South Africa over.
Well, I'll tell you what we saw, and it wasn't the full South African side. There are a lot of players in the British and Irish Lions who are very used to be able to pick and go near the line and staying there and getting over. And the South Africa A team showed, even on goal line stands, they are very resolute. And if you're gonna unlock them, you're gonna have to move it 1 or 2 out wide and create difficult questions for them.
You're right.
But this straight pick and go,
let me tell you. So I could not agree more with you. And in fact, what won the Premiership this year was, a whole season of managing the pick and go where you need to, but unlocking and scoring tries in the second half of the semi-final and the second half of the final. And,
right.
and I believe that that's why there is a bit of a case for some of the players who might have been part of that and changed the way they attacked to be part of what the Lions have to put on the field.
Well, we spoke to Tommy Bowe last week, who said that a comeback for Alan Wynne-Jones would be Lazarus-like. Well, he has come back, so he hasn't returned from the dead. The sporting injury graveyard possibly resumed the captaincy. I put it like this. Warren Gatland has seen him in training. Warren Gatland has known him for a long, long time. And he's going to have a very honest chat to him. And he'll simply say to him, Alan, you've got to be deadly honest with me. If you can last 50 minutes, I think that'll be enough. Because he'll be making changes around that time anyway.
Yeah.
Do you think that'll be the approach? And if he says yes, would you pick him? I think I've changed my mind actually on this. I think I would actually.
Yeah. I think that will be the approach. I think he will ask for honesty from Alan Wynne, and he'll get it.
Yeah.
I think we've seen the quality of individual. We've seen a lot of his decisions, some of his comments in the media. He's a measured man. He's an honest man. It reminds me of a Paul O'Connell, a Martin Johnson. What you see is what you get. These are big, strong men, and you want them in your pack. And when he gets that answer, he'll make his decision. But I think that answer is going to be, I can go for 50.
Yeah.
And on that basis, I would pick him too.
Well, time to speak to someone who really does know the Lions inside and out from a playing and coaching perspective. Sir Ian McGeechan, former Lions player and coach, is joining us now. Geech, Monday of a test week. Describe what it's like for this week from a coaching perspective.
I think it's the key week of the tour, Brian. You might well remember. I think it's the disappointment week for some and it's elation for others. How you manage that, I think, is key. I think the test players obviously go up to a different level thinking-wise because in preparation, and the players not selected have to get their heads around supporting and putting everything in to the training sessions, so the test team have got everything they want, and managing, the time off as well for both groups. So I think it is so important to get that right leading into the test.
From
match.
your experience, how many of the starting 15 would you have had in your head by the stage this week, and how different, if anything, will it have been from Warren Gatland?
Well, normally on Lions tours, I've never got close to the test team from the beginning of the tour. But I suppose you'd hope that would reflect when you're looking at training and what players are doing and combinations. I still think it'll be down to gut feeling from Warren and Gregor Townsend in particular about what the midfield looks like. I think most of the other areas you could look, and say there's strong arguments for certain players, but there'll be some unlucky players, I think, at the moment in this group who don't get selected. But I think the front row, Wyn Jones has come on to a game, so there's a bit more consistency there. But I think there are two good front rows, which is important against South Africa. For me, it's where they go with the midfield. I suppose 10, 12, 13 might reflect how they want to start the game tactically.
Well, look, let's start with 10, 12, 13 then. You get a feeling from afar about who's played in what games, and it's imprecise, but you think, well, you're not really featured. And it seems to me that Bundyaki and Elliot Daly have had far more runs than I thought they would have, and I just refuse to believe that's a coincidence. And I'm looking around and thinking, Robbie Henshaw for me has not featured because he's been injured, but I don't think when he came on Saturday, A, that he did an awful lot, and B, that the opposition was a real test and difficult to judge against. So you've got two centres there who I didn't think initially might feature, but how much can you read into that sort of feel?
Well, I think they've wanted to give them game time, obviously. I think 13 is the key one, and I think with Henshaw being injured, it's maybe changed some of the other combinations a bit. I'm still intrigued as to whether they'll put Owen Farrell in the starting 15 at 12. I think Biggar has been consistent, and as far as game management in that first half in particular, I think it's making sure the Lions are playing in the right places and their kicking game is spot on. And at the moment, I think, for me, Biggar heads it in that way. But I think having two decision makers, Farrell's good defensively, two playmakers, I was a little bit disappointed with Aki in the A game. If I'm honest, I thought he might make more of an impact, but I think he does. His lines of running I like, and I think Elliot Daly is definitely in the picture for the 13 spot now, because I think they know that they have to play. I just believe, but again, you're back to personal preferences. I just think the Lions have to be able to play some rugby to beat South Africa. So they have to be able to move the target. They have to choose how and when some of the contact occurs, just so they get some consistent tempo and momentum in the game. So that's why I think Elliot Daly, who's shown up well, he's got a good kicking game in the outside channel, I think has come into serious contention.
Sir Ian, on the back of that statement of yours, that they have to play rugby to win this game, and with only one real sort of competitive run out in the build-up, does it make the selection for Gatland difficult in two areas? One, he hasn't seen the guys up against it, and two, there's a bit of exuberance of youth, Marcus Smith, and the way he played against the Stormers, which might put his hand up for selection, given what happened here in the Premiership as well.
Well, hi Bob, good to hear you.
You too, my friend.
No, I think you're right. I think I can't get away from the fact, though, that Test match experience, Lions Test match experience, is important under pressure. So I think what came out of Saturday was Marcus Smith has shown, if you like, he's taken some of the question marks away about how we can play, and it's given him a good experience. But I don't think he would be ahead of the other two going into the Test matches simply because of that Lions Test environment, which I still believe is one step ahead of even normal international rugby, and particularly against South Africa. So I think it's how they manage. I think obviously the downside for South Africa as well is that they haven't got good game time. So both teams are going to be undercooked a little bit for intensity. Both teams will have taken things from the A game. And I think the Lions know that they've got to get the breakdown right, which was poor. But that, I think, came out of the fact that they haven't had to compete hard to win breakdowns in the previous games. And they know now they will have to. So their speed to break down, as you know, is key. And being able to challenge physically there early. And where they go from line out, particularly to first breakdown and then second breakdown, becomes really important. So those are the areas to me that the Lions have to understand what they want to do. And then I think the other plus they've got is they've got potentially a strong tactical bench where they can vary with the players they bring on, how they can highlight some of their play. So I think the players have given the coaches some big decisions about, and I think some of it will come down to gut feeling about what they're looking at in training, how players are reacting to each other, so that under pressure, you come back sometimes to quite simply that instinctive reaction to be able to do the right thing, which you two know very well.
And and I think you make an incredible point. The players have given the coaches a quandary, which is always probably a good thing. And Warren Gatland said there might be some fisticuffs amongst the coaches because they'll be putting forward the players that they think and they need to try and agree. Alan Wynne-Jones, Lazarus-like, back into the mix though. You spoke about the experience and the next level up that the Lions environment is. Surely that's a boon for Gatland to have him, if he wants to include him in that 23?
I'd be of the opinion if he wants to include him, he has to start. Because I think Alan Wynne's, all the pluses with Alan Wynne-Jones is that experience, Bob. And the 24 hours leading up to the Test match, the kick-off and the first 30 minutes when everybody will be under pressure. There will be the intensity. That is the Alan Wynne-Jones environment. That, to me, is where he's strongest, not coming off the bench. And I think him leading the Lions into that, if Warren Gatland is going to use him, I would use him from the start and then replace him. If he's not, I'd be tempted to say, well, don't use him at all in the first test and you have him starting in the second test, because the second test in Lions series are the big ones. And they get even more intense. The pressure's on because one team is one test down, and he is going to be vital, I think, around that second test atmosphere and environment. But I just think if there's any doubt, I wouldn't have him coming off the bench particularly.
Geek, I wrote about the known unknowns, how long will people last and so on. But what will Gatland have kept up his sleeve? And I hope this. The key to me for the breakdowns, like you said, the first and second breakdowns, is to make sure the South African first up, back row defence with Faf de Klerk sweeping round is put in a position where they have to guess. So they don't know exactly where the ball's coming in. So runners inside and outside the first receiver, the option to pass the ball straight across or round the back deep to try and get on the edge. We haven't seen much of that from the Lions, and that to me is the way, and with the differential timing of the ball off the line out and to the tail and so on. If you can occupy that and give them a picture which they're not used to seeing, you're far more likely to be able to go into contact on your terms and then make the second breakdown as quick as you can so they can't properly defend or get back into defence. Because if they don't do that, and I hope this is what he's kept up his sleeve, if they don't do that and they keep running straight into what we've seen is a very powerful defence, even as close as as a 5 metre, the red zone, then they're going to have trouble.
I absolutely agree, which is why I think that of the set pieces, you can actually control where the lineouts are to a certain extent in the way you build them up. Scrums, you wait for an error. I think there'll be parity in the scrummaging, and I think that's where, the Lions have a plus over maybe previous. The more pressure you can put on South Africa at the set piece, and this is where Tag Byrne, with his size, his height, and his cleverness, he's a player playing well, comes into it. Because if you can put all the pressure at the line out on their ball and on the Lions' ball, then South Africa have to start making decisions right from the word go about what happens next. Then you can pick and choose. Even if you go to a 5-man line out, you can actually pick and choose your ball carriers and shapes a bit. But with a line out, you're pulling the South African forwards around. So you're saying, have you practiced a 5-man defence of where you're going? And I just think there's a variety there, which means I think the Lions should be kicking out on the full more and not being afraid of it, or kicking very long. What they shouldn't be doing is what England did in the World Cup final, is from their own 22, just putting ball supposedly up to contest and losing it and giving South Africa a free run into the 22, because that is when they are dangerous. And I also believe South Africa during the World Cup got better and better. Obviously there was the scrummaging, but the line-out work and their work with their ball carriers at the first two breakdowns actually dominated tactically where the games went. So from a Lions perspective, if they can organise and put pressure there, then immediately they're actually putting a slightly different ball game in front of South Africa from a decision-making point of view.
For me, Ali Price is the former scrum half at the moment. I know Conor Murray got the captaincy, and it would be a bit of a, it would be difficult, having done that, to not name him in the starting 15. But did you really think he's a former scrum half at the moment, Conor Murray?
I'd have him on the bench, because I think the tempo of the game will go up, and I think the Lions will want that. I think South Africa will try and slow the game down and want it to be a more steady pace, simply because of the lack of preparation they've had, and just the impact of COVID. I think the Lions have a slight edge there. And you then look at who you can bring on in the back row. I'd start Curry in the back row, but I'd have Watson on the bench. He's a dynamic ball carrier, and I still think he's underrated against the big men. And if you're wanting to accelerate a game, then that's the thing to do. And Price is the same. I just think Conor Murray, there was 3 or 4 kicks he put in when things settled down against the air, which actually brought Lions penalties, and were very. And that is what he's good at. And he's also been in that test match intense environment that I just feel that he would be the one that gets control. A bit like, the argument for Alan Wynne starting is these players understand where that pressure comes from and get hold of the game when it matters in that first 30 minutes or so. And that's why I think that the Lions bench is so positive and can be so dangerous, because of the quality of player in an attacking way and in a tempo way that they can bring on the field and bring onto the field. Does
that mean, you're starting with the experience of Faletau at 8, does that mean you pick someone like Sam Simmons, who's very sharp?
Actually, Brian, I'd be tempted to start Jack Conan, because he hasn't done anything wrong. He gets in good position support-wise, and I'd be interested to know how he's been going in training, because certainly every time I watch him play, I've been impressed with him. I think Faletau's been there and done it again. I just worry whether, his game has been consistent enough that we'd see it from the outset on Saturday.
Have you got a feeling for the way the game, results-wise will go? Very difficult to call.
Yes, very. I think there'll be control. I just think controlling that, having the players and the control that's going to be needed up front is so important from a Lions perspective. And I think whatever happens, they they have to anticipate a physical bombardment.
Mm-hmm.
Sir Ian, this is with the greatest respect, but in your time as head coach, you wouldn't have had to deal with people tweeting you and sending Instagram messages and causing trouble. What do you think of the war of words that's happening between the head coaches, and how do you block it out?
I think it's great. No, it would have been teletext in my day, Bob. I think there is an influence on referees. I think he's relatively inexperienced as a referee at the very highest level. So I think they might have just been, both of them, trying to just put some thoughts there so that if nothing else, the referee comes to a conclusion and he shares it. So they know exactly what it's going to be before you get on the field. Yeah,
helps with their prep, yeah.
And then if you do, there's no excuses, and the players understand that, and it's been good banter, I think, and it takes the pressure off the players to a certain extent.
Geech, we've got to leave it there, but thank you for joining us. Not a cloud in the sky where you are, not cloud in the sky here. Long may that continue.
Yeah, South African weather, although not Cape Town, I don't think. That's the only place I saw any rain.
Thank you, Geech.
Great to speak. Thanks.
Bob, the South Africa A featuring 9 World Cup winners, the Bulls game. I think it was a bit of a shock for everyone. Is there anything you can really take out of that, or?
No, it's an interesting one. I think that it's you've got to be contextual about these things. The Springbok A side ran out 14-0 up by half time and made 7 changes and changed the game plan. So a lot of people might say, opportunity missed. I would say potentially opportunity taken, but for 35 minutes or so, and then shut down the plan. So I'm not sure that they would have got much out of a drubbing of the Bulls.
I'll tell you what, let's do it differently. Of the South Africa A side that beat the Lions, I know this is a very inexact thing and it's difficult to call that. Percentage-wise, how much better will the full Springbok side be than the one we saw in that Wednesday fixture?
I think they'll have to be 25% better at least to beat the Lions full side, motivated for a test match. But I think there is 25% more in that team. There were a few little things that stood out for me. And it's certainly nothing that I would say, get rid of that or we're really in trouble. Just maybe the deftness of touches, a few passes behind the players.
Let's go through. Kitchoff will start, probably, will he?
Yes.
Kitchoff, Hooker.
Probably in Benambi, I think.
If he's available, yeah.
Post-COVID, yeah.
Malherbe.
I would say so.
Etzebeth.
Yep.
Partnered with...
That's the only question, is that, do they play Peter Steff at 7 or do they play Peter Steff as a roaming 5?
Yeah.
Or...
Well, let's just say Detroit starts at 6 or whatever. Khaleesi at 6, rather. Detroit at 7. Who will be at 8?
And then, it's either, for me, Khaleesi potentially goes to 8 and you have either Jasper Wiese or Marco van Staden, depending, are you playing a jackal or a carrier?
Okay.
Because Wiese's been the carrier. And then I think that's when you look to a bench. You look, someone who's a little bit different. Can you carry someone? They'll be hoping against all hope that Dwayne Vermeulen puts his hand up for test 2 or 3.
Well, it'll be a big plus for him.
Well, he would be a massive plus because of the kind of...
well, he's a destroyer, isn't he?
Yeah. But I mean, Franco Mostert has been there and thereabouts. He's been sort of bench or in the starting lineup. He gives 280% of what he is. I mean, he's a tall flank and a short lock, but he's one of those guys who you can trust him.
De Klerk, Pollard.
I would say that's probably right.
Delende.
Yep. Lekanya. And this is where the selection has got to come.
Fullback.
Well, LaRue, came off sort of with a bit of a tender hamstring. I did try and phone Matthew Pearce, our lead commentator in South Africa, and he wasn't able to chat this morning. I don't know what they've done on Monday training with Leroux, but they might have to have a little look there. And,
if he's fit.
If he's fit, I would say they probably,
Colby
because that's Worth and
Mapimpi.
Mapimpi. Yeah. Mapimpi was the only one with a little bit of a question mark, because he's part of those 4 that were COVID isolated. But I did chat to about the camp yesterday morning, and all 4 had come through. They've had they're up to date. Lateral flows and PCRs, etc., and they were travelling today. So I'm assuming that they're all available.
Well, we've said that Andre Pollard is a very, very important for the Springboks, simply because Elton Yancey's not really. He had a lot of chances, doesn't seem to have pinned it down. Mm-hmm. And then if he doesn't, Morné Stein's going to be there, isn't he?
Well, Morné Stein, I mean, the evergreen Morné Stein.
How old? He's 36, 37?
He's 30, I think he's just turned 39.
Oh,
But
well, he looked fairly. Let's put it this way: he looked very competent. Didn't he?
He's outstanding, and he's had a great season. He's gone back and played domestically in South Africa, and then who do you want with 1 minute to go above a ball, 60 metres from the posts? Morné Stein.
Well, are they all going to be in Cape Town, the test now?
It's unconfirmed, but the rumours are starting to.
Because that's not in Bok's favour, is it? They wanted really to get him on the veldt for that.
You know what it's like. Whenever you come and visit Brian, we want you to go and stay in Pretoria, up country, and hard fields, etc. But I think Cape Town's probably going to be the safest place, and given the extra pressure on Johannesburg with the rioting and that kind of thing.
Okay, well, we've sorted the South African team out. Lions ones, they're always going to be difficult. Let's start. 15 for me, I think Liam Williams.
Okay, agreed on that.
Now, Josh Adams, for me, has got to be, he's a form winger. A lot of people have been saying Louis Rees. I mean, I think, actually, for me, Van der Merwe, I would pick Van der Merwe. With physical presence, he seems to get better every game, to me. And I just think in this particular test where there's going to be a lot of aerial stuff. I think he's the trade-off between him being very good going forward, which he is, and Reece Zammit, who's quicker, and the relative work in defence, I think, to me, just ticks his favour. I don't know. Look,
I think Reece Zammit is an incredible talent and will be good for a long time. I actually sort of have picked a back 4 because of the access you need and we spoke about this. They are not going to undo the Springboks by bashing them over.
Yep.
They have to score tries. So I agree with you. Williams, Watson Daly and Van der Merwe. Of those 4, I would pick the 2 wings, outside centre and fullback. And I've gone with Van der Merwe because he is physical, but he knows these South Africans. And sometimes we've seen it with people. If you've got a history with someone and you can just get that 10%, maybe he bashes someone over, he knows Cheslin Colby, he's played against him, all those kind of things might be a factor. So a back 4 there made up of those guys.
Well, 9, 10,
I've gone
12, 13.
Then I've gone Farrell at 12 because of that, the extra physical presence we said in defence with Bigger and Murray.
What about the 13 then? Daly. Okay. Front row for me would be Tadhg Furlong starting, Jamie George and Wyn Jones. I think on the bench, Cowan Dickey will definitely be there.
Yep.
Mako Vunipola. But when Sir Ian McGeechan was talking about, if you need to start speeding the game up, by this time, they ought to be able to get parity in the scrums because people are tired. Vunipola is a big ball carrier. Obviously, Cowan Dickey is.
Well, imagine bringing on, you could bring on a Marcus Smith, Ali Price, Luke Dickey. Suddenly your tempo's gone right up.
Well, funnily enough, if you have Carl Sinclair as well, you've got England front row. Hopefully they won't have as many.
Do to South Africa what South Africa did in the World Cup.
Try and do that, yeah. I think Alan Wyn Jones, if he's had that honest conversation, says at 50 is fine. Murray told you, obviously. Tadhg Beirne. After what Sir Ian said, I definitely got Faletau in. There's a bit of a question mark, actually. I think Faletau's played well enough. And Tom Curry. With Simmons on the bench, he's a flyer. Watson on the bench, he's a flyer as well. They've got a lot of pace to come for the bench. The way round for me it goes is you've got to start well. I know we have to score tries and you have to be inventive, but you can't fall off a physical battle in the first half because if South Africa get on top of you, They are the best in the world at just keeping going and going and going and pinning you, and they don't let you go.
I agree with you. The loose forwards I chose were Curry, Byrne and Simmons. I like what Simmons brings, and I think a Watson or even a Faletau would be safe off the bench. I think Faletau has had enough cracks at South Africa, and he's never turned in a man-of-the-match performance and absolutely played the South African loose forwards off the park, whereas Justin Tipuric had.
Yes.
He's done that twice, but he's obviously injured and misses out. So I've gone for Simmons because I think he's put in a real shift in the Premiership. And if he could step up to the next level, he'll be a Lion for a long time.
Well, we won't have long to wait for this, but that's all we've got time for this week on Brian Moore's Full Contact with the Telegraph. Huge thanks to my co-host Bob Skinstad and Sir Ian McGeechan for joining me. If you've enjoyed this episode, check out some of the others. Subscribe, register. And if you're looking for some further insight into what it's like to prepare for the Lions Test match against the Springboks, check out our mini-series, Brian's Lions, where I sat down with Sir Ian McGeechan, who's been on 2 Lions tours South Africa, also been in conversation with the former Springbok captain John Schmidt, who led South Africa to victory 2009. And on Wednesday, the final episode of that, Brian's Lions, that will be out. I'll be speaking to Simon Shaw, who had to wait 12 years before finally become a Test Lion in 2009. I urge you to listen to that. It's a very different point of view from Simon Shaw. I'll be back next week alongside Bob to look back, and we'll know who won the first Test series between the Lions and South Africa. So until then, with keen anticipation, it's goodbye.